Hey guys, Kevin Shaw here, editor-in-chief of moparconnection magazine. Today's video is really not going to be a tutorial on how you can restore your gauges, but this is going to be a little bit of an overview as to why we made certain changes and worked with certain companies here at moparconnection for our project cars. Right now, I'm sitting in the cabin of our '69 Dodge Charger that we call Brazen. This car is what originally was a little bit of a maybe day 2 or day 3 car, being that there was certain aftermarket additions, but the aftermarket additions that we added to this car are pretty modern, so it's not a period correct day 2 or day 3 car where you might put like a Mallory ignition on, or you might upgrade to a Hurst shifter. We obviously had upgraded to a modern Tremec TKX 5-speed. We have the fast, easy EFI. So the changes that we've made are modern, but we haven't lost the entire spirit of the car. Everything I've done on this car has pretty much been here in my home garage. We did go to Silver Sport to do the installation just because they wanted to document it for themselves as well as us. But there wasn't anything done there that couldn't have been done on jack stands here in my home garage. To be honest, the same thing goes with the Easy EFI. In fact, I've had to rewire it and reinstall it and modify it over the years, so much so that I think I'm on my 3rd installation of the same EFI system, just because we've done so much rewiring. We've done a lot of different modifications and changes to the engine. So with that, we've had to upgrade the fuel system. We've had to upgrade everything involved with the Easy EFI. But for the most part, you can see it's a pretty standard stock interior. Obviously, I've got a roll cage in it. I've got a 5-point harness, factory style steering wheel, factory style gauges, factory dash pad, factory door panels, factory style seats. It's really not too exotic. But there are some changes that we made for instrumentation that I felt were incredibly necessary. Outside of using the digital dashboard for the fast, easy EFI, we also went through and did the gauge cluster many years ago. And at the time, I thought it would be a good idea just to replace all the gauges with aftermarket gauges. I went through Classic Industries, but as a lot of you guys know, the aftermarket gauges are not necessarily perfectly calibrated. So like your fuel gauge is off, or you might find that some other of the gauges are just a little bit off and don't read as precisely as the factory gauges do. So the question becomes, do I replace them or do I have them restored? I'm finding that more times than not, the best route is to have them restored. And a lot of people can't do it themselves, and I'm not asking them to do it themselves. Today is not going to be how to do it yourself, but I am going to talk to you a little bit about what we did. And in this case, I sent off the speedometer because we had a bad speedometer. I sent off my speedometer to be restored by Redline Gauge Works. And Redline has a really great process where they clean the surface, they clean the face of the gauge, and they actually do a beautiful factory style rescreening or a screen print of that face, of that speedometer face. One of the coolest things that they do also is that they can go through and they can clean up the odometer, all the wheels, all the numbers on the odometer, so that they too look factory original, factory correct. They get rid of that yellowing, that the whites turn yellow and the blacks turn chalky gray. And that's just something that just happens with age. And Redline knows how to perfectly restore those. Same thing with our temp gauge, oil pressure. But in the case of the Charger, a lot of you guys might have noticed that instead of running a tick-tock tack, I installed, and this is back the first year I had this car, 25 years ago, I installed a monster autometer tack with a shift light. Now this shift light I live and die by, especially when at the drag strip and shifting gears manually. I need that shift light. And unfortunately, a TikTok tack doesn't have that shift light that I need. So unfortunately, I had to go the route of an Autometer monster tack. Not everyone's going to need that, and I don't expect you guys to copy what I did. But one thing that we did that we felt was mandatory, besides having the monster tack with the shift light, besides adding the monster tack with the shift light, was the big upgrade that has really made Redline Gauge Works so important to the Mopar audience, and that is the change of modifying the ammeter to a voltmeter. Now, a lot of you guys who have wired your own cars, a lot of you guys who've really gone, you know, elbow, shoulder deep into your cars, you'll know that the factory wiring for the Chryslers leaves a lot to be desired, especially in the fact that all of that amperage coming out of the alternator per the factory was going directly into the dashboard and directly into the ammeter, and from the ammeter out into the rest of the car. What this did was that this superheated the dashboard. This made the ammeter incredibly critical to your electrical system. And if either of these failed, you could set your dashboard on fire, you could kill the entire electrical system for your car. It's really, really a weak spot in the factory wiring harness. Not everything Chrysler did was perfect. I know a lot of you guys want to argue with me on that one, but my biggest point of contention when it comes to factory Chrysler was going to be the ammeter. And the nice thing is that Redline Gauge Works has been doing this ammeter to volt gauge upgrade. I was going to say swap, but it's really an upgrade. They've been doing it for 30 years. I mean, it is really what made the company. And I strongly, strongly recommend a lot of you guys, whether you have a rally dash like a Charger or a Super Bee or even a Roadrunner that's been optioned with it, or you have a regular ammeter in a 70 Fury, they can do the upgrade. And I'm going to show you how they did the upgrade, and we're going to show you what it looks like otherwise. I also want to show you some examples of how meticulous they are in restoring the gauges. They can restore a lot of components, but they're really known for their gauges. It's in the name of the company, and I really want to show you guys how super quality the end result is from a Redline Gauge Works gauge cluster. Currently, my garage is a little bit of a disaster. I typically try to keep it pretty tidy, like to keep the workbenches moderately clear for whatever I'm working on. But with so many different things going on right now, with the Charger up in the air because I've got the drive shaft out, because we snapped our drive shaft at the drag strip, and we are waiting the replacement drive shaft to be showing up soon. I've got a couple things literally and figuratively in the air. But going back to the conversation that we're having, I wanted to illustrate a little bit of what we're doing with not only the dashboard for Project Marcia, but the gauge cluster that we did. This, of course, is the dash pad that we had recently restored over at Just Dashes. By the time this video is published, the video documenting the restoration of this dash pad will have already gone live. But for those guys who haven't seen it, I strongly recommend you go check it out. These guys are absolute artisans. What you're paying for is for handcrafted, pure artwork. I mean, it's not very easy to do this. And every contour, every shape on this foam dash pad was done by hand. This is not done by a CNC machine. This is not spat out of a mold. This is actually all done by hand. We had to get this dash pad painted in B7 dark blue so that it would match the two-tone blue seats. But we're currently working with Chaz over at 4 Paint 1, who handcrafts and literally hand fills each one of these rattle cans And he also can sell these by the pint, don't get me wrong. But these spray cans are some of the best, and they're all factory correct colors. When it came time to do the dashboard itself, we reached out to Chaz to get the right color. He was more than happy to send out a couple cans of the Baltic Blue Poly. Has a really nice texture. We've already started on the restoration process. Here is the glove box door. Here it looks very blue. It does in the light have a little bit of a green, a little bit of a turquoise in it. And we might be going back and getting a darker blue. This is factory correct. The Baltic Blue is factory correct. But because we went with the B7 Blue for the dash pad, we don't want any sort of clash. The dash frame itself is being media blasted. In fact, I think I need to go and pick it up. But we still have quite a few components that we need to restore. I'll give you a good example. Again, the glove box door and the ashtray. Ashtray is very faded. It looks darker. It's lost a lot of its nice textured metallic finish, and it's a very muted, dull, dark, almost turquoise. We're gonna get it back to this condition, and these will be looking really nice. But I do want to put this in the media blaster and clean up the ashtray itself. So again, a little bit more upcoming on Marcia. Of course, the topic at hand is gauge clusters and having all of your instrumentation working and looking nice. This is the gauge cluster that we received back from Redline Gauge Works. They work so fast, I really wasn't even able to go out and get any sort of documentation of the process. They crank out their products so fast, but it's also incredible. The final product is breathtaking. They go through, they recalibrate all the gauges, they re-screen print all of the faces. You can even see the odometer dials are brand new, but they put it back to the original mileage, which I thought was really cool. So I still have my original mileage. We asked them to convert the ammeter to a volt gauge, so we have voltage. And what that means is that not all of the hot lead is coming in and superheating our gauge cluster, and then having that resistance exist here in the gauge cluster, which can result in discoloring of the gauges. It can result in a lot of heat coming through, which is going to warp and distort the plastic. And worst case scenario, God forbid, it actually can start a fire. A lot of these old Chryslers did catch fire because of the ammeters. Everyone says that's a wives' tale, but it's truly documented. So it was a problem. The guys at Redline can fix it. They can replace it. They don't need your whole gauge cluster. If you don't want to send your whole gauge cluster, they can do the ammeter conversion on its own. So this is something to consider. Shannon Hudson and his team are doing the Lord's work when it comes to fixing this one major problem. Everyone here, for the most part, has a modern car, and they're used to seeing just a regular voltage, a battery, a little battery symbol. And it shows, okay, it's charging. It's over 12 volts. We're charging. That's all this is for. One last thing to note is that the plastic here is not replaced. They actually went and restored this plastic. On camera, it's flawless. Even when I zoom in, you're not going to see the very faint crazing. We had some really bad, deep crazing. These are fissures or cracks in the plastic. Shannon went through and they polished and polished and polished and went through, and they got an absolutely flawless finish on the plastic itself. It's unbelievable, the conversion from before to after of what this looked like. So guys, honestly, they're worth every dime when it comes to getting your gauge cluster functional, calibrated, and looking brand new, if not better. Now, not to sound too much like Billy Mays, I do want to say, wait, there's more to talk about. And one thing that was really unique and something that I wasn't even sure they could even do was the guys at Redline took our giant 3.5-inch clock that I don't need a 3-inch clock in my dashboard. And they went and they converted it into a tachometer. This is going to be one of the best secret under the radar things that we've done for this car. Now, we did put in a SunPro Tach ages ago, but that was a little showy, and frankly I wasn't happy with the installation, and I just didn't want something that was so in your face. It also did block the switch for the convertible top, so I figured, hey, while we have it out, why don't we see if we can't make the clock into a tachometer? That apparently was no sweat for the guys at Redline Gauges, and they were able to do this. They said, in fact, this is something they do quite often, is replacing factory clocks with tachometers, oil pressure gauges, all sorts of different instrumentation that the car may not have come with. You and I know that a lot of cars just came with dummy lights, that if there was low oil pressure, if the temperature was low, if there was any other indicator, that a dial, old school analog gauge, would have told us, but has been replaced over the years with just an idiot light. These guys at Redline can install a factory style, factory looking tachometer, oil pressure gauge, whatever you want. They can put it into your car. It's a really cool option that these guys do. They do a lot of custom work. I've been talking about kind of OE factory looking conversions and restorations, but they also do a lot of custom work. They've done white face gauges for guys who are road racers. They've done custom logos for different companies and different racers. I do recall when they did John Schneider's General Lee that he did the Silver Sport with, and they all had a General Lee logo on it with John's initials on it with a white face. It was really cool, super unique. They've done a lot of Kenny Wayne Shepherd's cars. So these guys are very much an old hat when it comes to modifying, restoring, and customizing your instrumentation. So let's take a second and talk about Jim Hannon's 1967 red Belvedere 2 that you've seen here on the channel quite a bit. We've done a few upgrades on Jim's car, putting in an American powertrain, 5-speed TKX Tremec. We also did a fiberglass hood with VFN fiberglass and putting on an RO23 Superstock style hood scoop on it. And of course that 440 that we just got off of the dyno at Tommy's Auto and Machine, making over 570 horsepower. Although we just installed a set of TMI bucket seats right before Power Tour in 2024, the intent of the project was to get the car to look a little bit more like a 67 GTX. The interior needs a little bit of help because the GTX interior was of course the most deluxe of all the satellites and Plymouth B-bodies. A big component of that is the gauge cluster, and we sent this off to Redline Gauge Works just a few months ago, and it's come back to us absolutely perfect. One thing that I'll show you is also the circuit board on the back has been cleaned up and all of the terminals cleaned up so that there's better contact for all of the gauges. We're looking at just an all-around complete restoration. It really is better than factory. Redline is also very meticulous in either preserving or perfectly recreating factory stamps and factory markings that for you guys who are a little bit more anal retentive and really want this car original, they're going to be able to keep all of those factory markings and be able to pass all the original classes that they want to enter into during the car show season. Of course, for you guys who know the 66 and 67 Belvederes, satellites, and GTXs, you know that they don't come just this, but they also keep a very unique glove box door as well. This came from Classic Industries and was passed by the guys at Redline, made sure it was correct, made sure that everything fit, and even has the factory correct GTX emblem on the door. So this is a really neat companion to this finished piece right here. Again, we really have to thank the guys at Redline and really have to acknowledge their skill set, their ability, their artisanship. Again, you're really just not going to find this at just any ho-hum shop. these kinds of jobs do get farmed out to guys like Redline. Redline works hand in glove with some of the biggest automakers. They work with the Ring brothers. They work with Steve Strope and Troy Trepanger. They work with a lot of these custom car builders, and they do work with a lot of the factory restoration shops as well. So if you guys have always wondered, how do you get your gauge clusters looking right, working right, perfectly calibrated, the best route isn't just to buy new ones and shove them in and hope they work, but to have them fully restored. And for the guy who doesn't want to restore them himself, I strongly want to recommend that you guys take a look at Redline Gauge Works. But if you mention that you saw this on Mopar Connection magazine, or even just say the words Mopar Connection, they're going to cut 10% off your final bill. That's a 10% discount that you're not going to get anywhere else. So again, we're looking at safety, we're looking at proper instrumentation, we're looking at proper calibration, we're looking at visibility, and quite frankly, just looking good in your car. It really does brighten up your interior. It does make it a pleasant experience to sit behind the wheel. Too often we've been to car shows or even been in our buddy's car and we've seen some really hokey looking AutoZone dial gauges hanging off the bottom of the dashboard, or they've just put a picture or some stickers over a bad gauge, or they've put a tack to cover up another bad gauge. It just looks a little hokey and it looks really slapdash. And quite frankly, you don't have to live with that, and you don't have to pay buku bucks to get your car looking right. We do recommend working with some shops if you feel that it's outside of your skill set. It's okay. Now, for the guy who does want to do it himself, we've got plenty of articles in our restoration segment on moparconnectionmagazine.com, where we walk you through how to restore your dashboard, how to restore your gauge cluster, how to update your different gauges or replace them with Year One or Classic Industries, and those tutorials are there. But a lot of guys that we're encountering either don't have the time to invest, don't have the skill set themselves, or quite frankly, are more comfortable farming out that work. And that's okay. We'd rather see you enjoying your car and seeing the car out on the road than grinding on you for not doing it all yourself. Hey, that's fine. If you want to farm some work out, it's okay. We just want you to enjoy the car. That's what's most important, and that's the biggest thing over everything. So I hope you enjoyed this very short video. I hope this gets you a little excited to maybe consider getting that gauge cluster looking right, and why it's so important that you do have proper instrumentation, that you know your oil pressure, that you know your operating temperatures, that you know that your alternator's working, that you have all that instrumentation. You need a tachometer, you need a speedometer, you need these things. The more information you get, the better. We're a big proponent of having all the information you can get, and having an instrument cluster that's going to give you that information is paramount. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was useful. If you did enjoy it, why don't you leave a like, maybe leave a comment, share your thoughts or opinions. We'd love to hear from you guys. The comment section is where we get to converse a little bit. But if you guys want more awesome Mopar content, more than what you're getting here at the YouTube channel, why don't you go visit us over at www.moparconnectionmagazine.com, where new articles are written and published every single day, Monday through Friday, entirely subscription free to you. As long as you got a Wi-Fi signal, you can read the magazine. So guys, thanks again for watching. Thanks again for checking out the magazine, and we'll see you over there.